Welcome back, everyone, to the Marketing Share podcast. I'm your host, Alec, and with me is my co-host, Barb. We are glad you're here. We're glad to be back in studio. Today's guest is going to be on a really cool topic from my standpoint because it's all about product marketing today. And that's one of the areas that I love talking about. And it's kind of an area of expertise for me. So I'm excited to have our guest, Marcy, with us today. Before we jump into the introduction of Marcy, let me just do a quick acknowledgement to Socialize Video, who is our partner and sponsor. They help us with all of our post-production on this podcast, both the video and the audio portions. Socialize Video is a specialist in video and graphical content for marketing. So if you need any of that type of support, please go check them out at socialize.video. So quick thanks to all of our team there. So now switching back to our guest introduction, Barb, you want to tell our guests about Marcy and who we've got today?
Yeah. I kind of started this episode thinking about, healthcare marketing because I know Marcy from a healthcare background. She's had a super rich career at places like Bausch & Lomb, Sunstar, also Abbott Nutrition, and, great companies. But really today is kind of about how you take the technical aspect of whatever you're doing, whether it's scientific, whether it's technical, fintech, whether it's anything technical, and really simplifying it because that's what the marketer's job is, right? And I know Marcy is an expert at this area. She really has a knack for pulling those nuggets out when she meets with R&D to make sure that she's conveying the complicated and making it simple because that's what we all need, especially as I think about healthcare, right? Welcome, Marcy.
Hi, thanks for having me. This is fun.
So just really quick, I told you a couple of great places Marcy has worked. Also, just one other thing, Marcy has her name attached to 5 patents that she actually helped launch at these companies. So she really understands the notion of, pulling out the key benefits for these products and then translating that to both the professional audiences, but also end users. So welcome, Marcy. Marcy, tell us a little bit about how your career journey happened, how you got started in this, and, just where it all happened.
Oh, again, thanks so much for having me. I actually started my career in sales, and I would get the marketing materials that they would create at headquarters that we're supposed to use out in the field to use with customers. And I would look at them and I'd be like, what are they smoking up there at headquarters? Because I just don't get what it's like out here in the real world. And that's when I got interested in marketing, because before that, I thought marketing is what you do when you go shopping for groceries. So that's what my mother said, I'm going to buy eggs, I'm going marketing. So I went back to grad school, got my MBA in marketing. And my first job out of grad school was actually in distributor marketing. And then eventually I moved into the more traditional brand marketing role. And from then on, my career was in that product marketing, brand marketing, marketing strategy on products where the patient or the consumer is ultimately purchasing, but the healthcare professional is influencing or prescribing. So I was marketing to both the healthcare professional as well as to the patient. So that's where I spent the next 25 plus years, companies like Colgate-Palmolive, as you mentioned, and Sunstar, where I was headed up all the new product marketing, where I have my name on 5 patents, which is really fun for a marketer to have their name on patents, especially when I'm with my brother, the engineer, who has no patents. So that's really fun. So, anyway.
That's a really cool distinction because not many marketers can say that they've got patent naming in the mix as well. So I think that's great. I also like the fact that how you said that you started out in sales. And I think that that's something, not all marketers, I've never held a sales position, but I think when you do have a little bit of a sales background, it does give you a little bit of an additional perspective, especially when it comes to complex products, right? Which is kind of what we're the theme of what we're talking about today. So I think it'd be great. Just talk to us a little bit about how you've done this in your field. And I know your field is specifically healthcare, but I think what you're going to share with us is relevant in any complex industry with a complex product. What are the key things principles that you utilize to make sure that you can effectively do the job that us marketers are asked to do, which is, hey, how do we make this complex product more understandable to our target audience so that they'll be interested and want to learn more and eventually buy our solution?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you'll probably hear me say, but and starting in sales, I have a real passion about that voice of customer and making sure that you're understanding the voice of customer, and the customer can be the end consumer patient or whoever that end customer is. The customer can be the sales force. Sometimes that's your first line, right? And the customer can be the healthcare professional or that influencer, but really understanding what are their pain points, what are their unmet needs, and how is your product or service going to solve that problem or that pain point or that unmet need. So that's the first thing, to really understand how that product is really going to solve it. And then the other thing that I do is that it's really important to build the relationships internally with your cross-functional colleagues. And I've been fortunate to be able to do that, and I've been told that I have the nerd to human enzyme. So I worked really closely with R&D scientists and engineers to really, once you have that unique product that solves that benefit, to say, hey, help me understand that mechanism of action, that how does this product work to drive that benefit? Why is it doing what it's doing? Hey, I barely got through high school chemistry, right? So you got to kind of dumb it down for me, right? And they've always been really helpful to do that. And then once I can understand why it does what it does, then I'm able to then break that down into like the creative brief, along with the objective, the strategy, the other bigger picture things for whatever agency or creatives that I'm working with, so that I can then create materials and messaging that is more easily understandable. Now, I personally like to do that in things like illustrations or animations that show that mechanism of action. And often that is a way that makes it a lot easier for people to understand than words. So, and I've worked in global marketing for a big chunk of my career. So when you have things that are in visuals, it's a lot easier than to be used globally, because then they can just put their own, subtitles or whatever. They can put whatever language they need to, than if it's just words and bullets. So hopefully that answers that.
Speaking of channels, right? Like communication channels, right? That plays a big role in how you make something complex. Talk to some of the communication channels that you have found that work with audiences similar to what you just mentioned.
Yeah. Well, of course, now there's a lot more different options through social media. One of the things more recently that I found to be super helpful is to do things like white papers, or with scientific products. If it's so important with healthcare professionals to have some kind of clinical or scientific results, even if it's in vitro, like in a lab, that you can then work with a publication to get published, and then you can cite that publication. But once you have that kind of an article or a white paper or a clinical that's written, you can then take, parse that out and take those bits, and then have those bits, either you can, edit the language a bit to use on consumer social media, or you can put it on different sites. You can partner with different publications that are targeted to your healthcare professionals, and get it out through those channels. But there's a lot of different ways that you can take, a technical piece that might be 3 or 4 pages of either white paper or clinical, whatever, and then cut different pieces out of that and use it in multiple different ways and even translate it into different languages. And now you can have a whole content calendar from one piece that you started with. So it becomes a really efficient way to use multiple different channels of communication from one piece. That's been at least from recently.
So, Marcy, I think one of the things also you touched on is make me thinking about the next question here is you mentioned having to create content for like a medical content for a researcher or for a doctor or something like that. And I think what you're really speaking to there is the fact that in your field, like many other fields, right, especially in B2B, you're never just marketing to one buyer or one decision maker. You've got multiple different decision makers, right? I think the stat out there is like in B2B right now, the average buying decision constitutes, like 7 different people from different roles. So maybe talk a little bit and share with our listeners, how do you break that down? How do you approach that, especially when you have to create different levels of content for different roles?
A lot of it's about doing the homework up front, right? You need to understand each of those different the cross-functional people and what is their motivation, what's their unmet need, even if you can, and this is working with your salespeople that call on them, right? From a marketing standpoint, keeping that relationship with the salespeople. How are they compensated? Like if you have the business person in a buying group, are they compensated by, by the number of contracts that they're writing, by the lowest price, by the the number of products or the minimal number of products by inventory levels, and then you might have the healthcare professionals that are advising. They might have a patient advocacy group. I have no idea. You might have multiple influencers. So it's really important to do your homework to understand who's going to be in that room and what are their motivations, and then you're going to need to have like some tweaks in the message to each one. So the buying group, you might need to have some information on things like, I'm making it up, but with this product, all the absolute price may be higher, but the patient needs to use it less often over the course of the year. So they would actually need spend less over the course of the year. I don't know, I'm sort of making it up, but you need to find that health economics story. So there's different ways that you would approach it if you understand what are the motivations and the key benefits for each of the people that are.
The value chain plays a huge role in healthcare marketing today, right? And understanding the agendas at each level of that value chain is really important. So let's get into the doc patient kind of idea, because, it is important to, have great clinical data and marketing materials for the doc. Do docs value when you also put together the patient material for them? How do they feel about that?
I believe that they do. It makes it a lot easier for them to be able to communicate with the patient. One of the biggest challenges for doctors and for manufacturers of healthcare products is the compliance or I guess the appropriate word from the FDA is adherence, and getting the patients to actually follow through on the advice. And I can't remember the statistic. It's very low. I think it's like less than 50% or something like that of patients actually take the medications that's prescribed. It might be even as low as a third. I don't know the statistics, so don't quote me on it, but it's very low. And some patients even are, cutting up their pills, even though they're not prescribed that. Some of it is because of the cost of medications. So anything that's going to make the communication from the doctor to the patient easier so that the patient is going to actually follow the instruction is going to be of value to the doctor. At the same time, they don't want to be seen as, hawking a brand because it takes away the credibility in their mind of them being an objective, intelligent medical professional in the eyes of the patient. So, you want to try to make it just clear, concise, in patient-friendly language, and probably unbranded, or this is provided by this blah 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 brand. And the more that your product is differentiated, then clearly it's the only brand that is able to show what this particular product does.
I would think too, Marcy, that there's a balance there that you have to do between what you describe, which is explaining the benefits of the solution and also how to use it, right? So hitting the adherence requirements, but then at the same time also making sure that you're explaining to that patient to the material how this helps them, right? What's the benefit of this medication? They're going to feel better. It's going to allow them, right? Putting it kind of more into that from, like you mentioned, the voice of the customer, right? Well, now you're creating a brochure for the patient, so now you have to speak about the patient benefit and how their lives are going to be changed by that. So I think there's so many things that you're trying to juggle, right, within that marketing piece.
Right, absolutely. And the other part of that voice of customer for the patient and for the marketer is to, again, doing that homework and understanding the patient journey, because there's different points on that patient journey where they're going to be open to the message. For example, when they're first diagnosed with a particular, disease, they may not be open for the message. They might shut down and like, oh my God, there's no way or that might be the most time that they're open, because they might be researching all kinds of things, and then maybe down the line after they've dealt with it for a while, they're like, okay, I'm already set. I'm not looking to change. So you do need to understand that patient journey also. So that's a really important part. The other thing I wanted to mention, I just wanted to go back for 1 minute about them, that they do, I want to reiterate how important it is to have some kind of scientific evidence or clinical results, and how important that is to them. Now, they want to know that there's some scientific evidence and clinical evidence. They may not actually read any clinical results or any, published whatever, but they want to know it's there. It might be in some journal that's collecting dust on their coffee table, but they want to know it's there.
So in other words, there's a level of table stakes that you have to check the box. Hey, look, okay, we have it. They may not necessarily peruse it in detail, but you still have to have it, right?
Right. So if you show in that chart that, your product, was higher than the other, and there's a footnote that, that was in some kind of published in some peer-reviewed whatever, or sometimes it's data on file, but at least that there was some kind of, even if it's an in vitro, they like to see that was some kind of testing going on.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Evidence-based marketing, right? That's what we're in the business of, for sure, in healthcare. I resonated with what you said about the buying cycle, right? I spent some time in the hearing field where it takes somebody like 5 years to buy a product, right? And so many manufacturers were talking about the features of their product. Well, these folks didn't even know they had the condition. So you have to really, like at the very beginning of that buying cycle, you have to say, do you experience this? Do you experience that? Oh my gosh, I do. Maybe I have hearing loss, right? So it's like you have to kind of take them on the journey with you, and your messaging may completely miss them if you're not adhering to that, right?
So you're saying that they're not hearing you?
That's right. They've missed it completely.
I'm kind of curious, how much in your experience with healthcare marketing is the content that you're producing, like you described content being produced for the doctor to the patient, right? We also know, though, that we see TV ads all the time for medications, and that's obviously coming at it from the different side, which is making consumers aware that, oh, hey, there's this medication out there that can help me, so that then when they go see their doctor, say, hey, how about that, right? I assume that's the philosophy there. So I don't know what you're thinking there. And I think there's probably some corollaries to other types of industries as well, right? Which is like when you've got that B2B to C type of mechanism, how much do you split your marketing between coming at it from the B2B side versus from the B2C side?
Yeah, there's a lot of analysis that goes through whether you're going to do TV advertising. And I mean, if you'll see some of those commercials are for like very, very specific, if you suffer from, HER2 negative, but, you can be sure that they have done analysis that if they even get like 3 more patients that, that have to spend like $1 million a year, that insurance, it's worth the whatever that they're spending on the advertising. it's mixed reviews from doctors because it puts pressures on doctors to prescribe something that they may or may not believe is best
Right.
for the patient.
Right.
But it at least starts the conversation with the doctor, and maybe something that the patient may not have been comfortable having the conversation with the doctor now says, well, I saw this commercial for this, and maybe this is what I'm suffering from. Can we have a conversation? So I think from that aspect, it's sort of like, as marketers, we know that competition is good because it brings up the whole category. So having that kind of advertising, brings awareness to a particular segment and sparks the conversation. So from the manufacturer standpoint, that again, there's a ton of analysis that goes on. There's a lot of testing of those commercials. There's a lot of presentations to senior management before they spend a dime. I've been at the pharmaceutical companies deciding whether or not to air TV advertising for drugs, and whether it's worth it. And it's mixed from the doctor side of it. And of course, there's a lot of regulations, and as you've heard, when you watch those, all that mouse type, as they say, side effects can include blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't be airing if it wasn't worth the spend, and it's part of an integrated marketing plan where there's also sales reps that are going to the doctor's offices
Mm-hmm.
with all the clinical information and having that one-on-one dialogue with the doctor. There's a whole medical science liaisons that are either MDs or pharmacists or whatever, that if there's things that the sales rep is not allowed to say directly to the doctor, they call the medical science liaison that is allowed. There are clinical studies that the sales rep is not even allowed to give out, but somebody who's an MD is allowed to have that conversation. There's a lot of regulations on how to communicate different information.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all part of an integrated, yeah.
I'm glad you.
I know a lot of people think that there's a whole
Yeah,
conspiracy on drug companies and stuff, but there are so many laws about what you can say and not say and what you can do with the doctor that just from being on the inside, that's all conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you spoke about the whole competitive nature too. I think that's important as you think about how you strategize your messaging, right? The whole competitive track. Have you ever considered that in some of your like SWOT analysis when you think about starting a new campaign or a new initiative? How do you factor that into the business case?
You always have to see where you sit within the competitive set, right? Because the last thing you want to do is have your message driving competitive sales, right? You want to make sure you're differentiated. So again, it's all about doing that homework and having a very clear creative brief for your agency or for whomever is going to be developing your messaging and your visuals. I typically like to do not only a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, not only for ourselves, but the key competitors, and to put on the hat as if you're each competitor and think, okay, if we were our competitor, how would we rate ourselves with our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and make sure that what our message is and what our and really, if you're developing a product that's meeting an unmet need, just by the definition, it's an unmet need. That means that their competitors in the marketplace are not meeting that need, right? So in theory, if we really are bringing out a unique product or service, it should be differentiated from the competition. So now you got to make sure your messaging is also differentiated from the competition. But it's very important to make sure that you are differentiated. And again, voice of customer, when you have some, even chicken scratchings of what your messaging is going to be, to even back of the envelope or as I call mother-in-law research, to, hey, take your competitive ad or a couple of competitive ads and your ad and, put them together and and have a few people that aren't as close to the business and say, what do you think is the key message of this? What do you think is the key message of ours? And see if they're feeding back to you different messages.
No, I think
That's interesting. I think in healthcare, I can think of examples where you see the entire spectrum of kind of marketing focus on there, right? Because you can, and you touched on two ends of them, right? One where you are a very unique product. There's almost nothing else like you in the market. So from that standpoint, then your job as a marketer is just really play up that, hey, look, here's a solution that you've never had before, but now it's available. On the flip side of that, though, you're marketing a product that maybe there's a lot of competition. It's been out in the market a lot, but now your job as a marketer is to more focus on not spend too much time trying to do a competitive comparison, but pick what you think is your best strength and then just push that all the way, right? Do you see that the two different sides of that, right? Because I think it exists in a lot of different industries.
Yeah. Well, and again, then that's really just about finding that message that's going to resonate and be most relevant and motivating to that target. And sometimes it's about defining your target as more differentiated and more, and sometimes it's about being more narrow and really owning a more narrow target. And then you have that loyal consumer for a more narrow target, which can actually give you a higher margin because they're so loyal. I'll give you an example. A quick example. We were looking at launching a dry mouth product, and I had somebody on my team who was just fabulous and super smart, and she was looking at, where might there be targets for dry mouth, and Biotine really owned the market, and she saw the growing market on people with sleep issues. And if you think about the sleep apnea and those machines that are like sending like blowing air down your throat, that's just exacerbating the whole dry mouth issue. And then you look at all the ways that then you could target people with sleep issues. And there's a whole growing area of sleep dentistry that are fitting appliances for sleep, and how you could partner with those appliance people. And like Tide puts in the washing machines a sample of Tide, you could put samples of the dry mouth product, and truckers have to go to like sleep testing like every quarter to make sure, so now you could like partner with the Truckers Association. So like there's like a whole thing that you could do by just targeting people with sleep issues. And now you can own that and build a whole business just on that and not compete with the everyday people over here with Biotine. And it's like, oh my God, that's so brilliant. Yeah. Now I can't say that is right? I can't say that the company did that, but it's just a brilliant strategy.
Marcy, do you have some sort of telepathic issues? I have some new clients in the sleep apnea area too. And literally I'm in this exact same conversation right now. So that's amazing. Really what you're talking about is like a holistic view of how you think about the communication channel, right? From the very beginning, maybe some of it's elevating the conversation of a condition or a therapy that people haven't thought about. Part of it is expanding your target audience like that. And part of it is addressing these pain points. Talk to how companies now are really taking the entire buying process throughout every touch point and elevating the conversations around products.
Again, it's really about getting that holistic, that integrated marketing plan. And, one, identifying your target, understanding their pain points, finding the messaging that is relevant and motivating to them, understanding where they consume their information so that you can make sure that your message is touching them at the places where they consume their information, right? And then when you're taking your content and parsing it out into different places, your target is getting their information in multiple places. Because they say, what is it like? Somebody has to get a message 6 times before the behavior starts to change, and behavior change is so hard, right? So those are some of the ways that that a company really has to do their homework. It's all about doing the homework, understanding your customer, and the decision makers that influence that. So it's that customer, and then some of that is the influencers. Then you have to it's like the spider web. Then you got to go back a level. Okay, so now you got to understand that influencer, the healthcare professional, where do they consume their information? What's their pain point? Okay, so they want to, they have 6 minutes with the patient. That they want to make the message easier. They want to be the hero of the patient. They consume their information in the journals and at conferences. Okay, so now we got to do that piece. So that it's do your homework, understand your customer, make sure your message is relevant, motivating to your target. It's not rocket science.
No, it's not rocket science, but sometimes you can forget just one or two of those nuances that can make or break a product launch, right? I mean, I see it that way. Are there any?
I've seen a lot of customers will say, a lot of clients will be like, how can you make sure that my product, I got this great video done. I want it to go viral. Can you make it go viral? No, you can't just make it go viral, right? Well, who's your target? Who's your target and why is this product important to your target and where are they consuming your information? And then, if you can get it out into the places where they're consuming information, then you have a better chance of it going viral, right?
Yeah. And if you address their pain point in a fun and interesting way, it might resonate and go viral.
Yeah. Right. So anyway,
so last question, I guess, new tools. Is there any ways, what kinds of things are you using, today when you're helping to make the complex simple? What kinds of things do you use? You spoke to maybe like the SWOT analysis, doing some of your homework. What other things have you used?
There's a lot of different ways now to do, there's different tools now in market research to get that voice of customer. Certainly with iterating on messaging through digital channels. I can't emphasize enough how important that voice of customer is. In communicating a mechanism of action, I'm a huge fan of illustrations and animations, which then you could put onto, YouTube or videos. I wouldn't, if you can do it at 30 seconds, a minute, short clips that you could then populate into different ways that you can get it out on social media. So, those are some different tools. Of course, AI is the big thing, which I think is a good starting point. I personally find it hard to start with a blank sheet of paper and then, come up with a whole bunch of stuff. But if AI can get you started and then you some thought starters, then that might be a good way to use AI because, of course, you have to fact check and with AI. You got to be careful with it.
Yeah, there's hallucinations, right? So you have to fact check. We've learned that on one of our other podcasts. Well, thank you so much, Marcy. I totally appreciate you coming on the show and, kind of explaining how to make things simple. And, I forgot to mention, you even have yet another, like so many of our friends, we're actually expanding our side gigs, passion projects and so forth. And you have the newest gig, which I love, which you went to Second City and now you've got even some comedic chops, right?
Yeah. I've been doing improv and stand-up comedy. I have my first paid gig last month and feel free to go on my YouTube channel at Marcy E. Freeman and see some of my stand-up.
Well, okay, so you've got stand-up and you've got product marketing. And where do they reach you for your product marketing consulting?
mefproductmarketing.com.
Well, here's a curveball question for you, Marcy. Do you see any corollaries between your approach to being a comedian and your approach to being a good marketer?
Well, all those years of presenting in boardrooms, I guess, of all those marketing plans. And I thought, maybe my real career goal is to be in stand-up comedy, but marketing's the next best thing.
Hey, where do you think she got all those great stories, right?
Yeah,
all of her, material comes from the boardroom, probably.
Well, I don't think you have to give up your day job yet, because I think based on the things that you talked about, I mean, the things that stood out for me so much, and this is as another product marketer, right? I loved how you talked about, look, you really have to know your customer, right? That voice of the customer, because that's one of the big things that marketers can provide, right? We can represent the voice of the customer back into the company. So know them, and also realize that it's not just one customer, right? You probably have multiple people to talk to, and not only know them, but know where they get their information. I think that's a hard one that you forget, we got to know where they're getting their information, so that you also not only produce good stuff, but where to put it. And then probably my most favorite thing that you said, which I was just inside, I was like, yes, going to, niche down. Oh my gosh. If you can niche down, you can sometimes create that differentiation you're looking for. So I loved that part. That was probably my top thing that I got, and loved how you talked about that. But thank you
Yeah.
so much for being
Great.
part of our
So
show.
much fun. Thanks for
so much,
having me. It's so
Marcy.
fun.